Thanks, everyone. Yes, I'm Avis Whyte, and I'm from the University of Westminster, and Seema and I are going to talk to you a little bit today about researching early ethnic minority women barristers. Just wanted to say a quick word as to why we're here doing this, and Judith mentioned it a moment ago, and it's because of our involvement with the Inner Temple Race and the Legal Profession project. Now, this project was launched in December 2020, and it's the first of what will be an annual roundtable series examining the lives of Black and Asian minority ethnic people in the legal profession. And it was launched, as I say, in December 2020, and it sort of came about on the back of the celebrating 100 years of women law in the law. It was quite a successful project. So from that, we decided to do the uncovering, rediscovering Black lives, this recovering lives lost from the archives. So it's a wide group of researchers going to be looking at this project. So we've got academics and professionals and law students and archivists looking at this. And we will be essentially looking or discovering the lives of the first BAME lawyers, both women and men, even though the focus of today is women. The Inner Temple project will cover both women and men lawyers, and it goes back. I think the first entrance was John Casey Hayford in 1800s, right up to the present day, for people being called to the bar in 1998. So both women and men in that project. Okay. So I'm just going to turn you over to Seema now. Seema, I may just do my slides a moment because there's something going wrong with my video, so I think it's taking up too much of my bandwidth. So I'm going to turn that off for a minute and then share the slides from now. Okay, there you go, Seema. Thank you.
Okay. All right, good. I'll turn my video off as well because, as I've said, I'm wired up to the max. I don't trust any connection. So, as Avis said, we are currently researching early ethnic minority barristers, and what we'll do in this very, very short presentation is go through one of the profiles that we have been researching. Avis, if you don't mind switching to the next slide. Thank you. What the research has shown us is that ethnic minority women do suffer negatively because of their ethnicity, because of their sex, but also because of other factors as well. So, for example, because of their socio-economic background and perhaps even something like their age. And often when you're researching or you're just thinking about these types of discrimination, we often focus on just one form of discrimination. But it's important to remember that some people are subjected to two or more types of discrimination. And because of this, their experience is altogether different. You know, so when you're thinking about ethnic minority women, their experience is very different to the experience of white women. And their experience is very different to the experience of ethnic minority men. Avis, next slide. Thank you. So when you are researching, we can't just focus on one form of discrimination in isolation. It is very, very important to look at how different factors intersect with one another and think about how this impacts on people and how it shapes their experience. And by doing this, it kind of helps us understand sort of the depths of the inequalities. Just move on, Avis. Thank you. So this is the case study that we've been working on. And as Judith said, we are part of the project and we are going to be looking at other ethnic minority barristers. But we started off with some research on Clara Esther Ramdahol. The reason why we selected Clara, it kind of ties in with what Judith was just saying, and that's the relationship between the biographer and the subject. So Clara illustrates both mine and Avis's heritage. Avis is Jamaican. I am Indian, but my parents were born and brought up in Africa. Now, Clara was from Guyana, and Guyana has a big Indian and African community, and it was a former British colony, so it shares a lot of similarities with many of the other Caribbean islands. So that's really why Avis and I were drawn to her, because of her background, and it kind of ties in with our background. Now, a second reason why we decided to start with Clara is because she was one of the earliest Guyanese lawyers. And her life, as we'll see in a moment, her life was cut short and her potential was unrealized. And we just both found it interesting. It was really interesting for us to explore how she managed to qualify in the era she did, and we did, and we still are. We're speculating on what she could have become had her life not ended quite shortly. And then the third reason why we decided to focus on Clara is because her educational achievements, alongside that of her contemporaries, they were a catalyst for change in the Indian community. So we found one source that did mention her, and it kind of said that her journey encouraged other Indians in Guyana to send their daughters to school for an education. So then how did we go about researching Clara? I mean, it is quite difficult. There isn't that much information on her. And what we found is that a lot of the sources were just repeating the same information. But as a starting point, we did what all students do, which is we Googled her. And you kind of have to just keep trying, looking at all the results that come up. And you have to go beyond just the basic search and your initial results. So we did find, and as you can see on this screenshot here, we did find a really useful PhD thesis that was written on Indians in British Guyana. And in it, Clara's educational history was mentioned. And that's how we found out that, you know, she inspired other Indians in Guyana to pursue education. And the PhD thesis was quite important as well, because it just gave us some information on the historical context. So what did we actually find? If we move on to the next slide. Okay, well, surprisingly, we don't know when she was born. As I said, there's not much information there, and a lot of the sources are just repeating the same information. So at the moment, we still don't know when Clara was born. We know that she did go to school in the 1920s, and interestingly, she then, after she graduated, she then became a staff member at that very school. We know that her journey to England started in 1932, and that she came over here to, you know, pursue her ambition of having a career in the legal profession. We know that she was admitted to Middle Temple at the age of 23, and that she did complete her bar finals in 1939. Again, if you look at point number 7, this is a bit of, like I said, we only found a few sources. Some of them mentioned that she was the second Indo-Guyanese woman to qualify as a lawyer, but then we found a few other sources that were saying she was the third Indo-Guyanese woman to qualify as a lawyer. And that meant then that we had to do a bit more research. So Avis did do some research on the other two Indo-Guyanese lawyers, and so it is the case that she is the third Indo-Guyanese woman to qualify as a lawyer. And then Clara's story takes a bit of a tragic turn after that. So she was quite homesick. Her father had just passed away, so she decided to go back home. She did board a ship. We are obviously talking about the Second World War here, that area, and the boat that she was traveling on was hit by the Germans, and She did try and scramble onto another lifeboat and then another boat, but sadly she did die at sea. So then that's what we know. As I said, there were a few question marks there where we had to do a bit more research, and we still don't know the year that she was born. I mean, we can guess from the other sort of facts that we have found out about her, but still we don't know for sure. But all of this now leads us on to the next part of our research, is what else do we need to know about Clara in order to build up a fuller picture?
And that's where I come in. Thanks, Seema. So what else we need to know? I think in order to build up this fuller picture, as Seema's mentioned there, we do need to put some context around the facts of her life and her achievements, so we can better understand that life and what her potential might have been had she not died. So we need a more complete and hopefully accurate profile of what made her what she was. So we're looking at things like her motivation. So what were her motivations for leaving British Guiana? What was going on at home at the time? What promise did the motherland hold for her? So we need to kind of research those kind of things to get some more context there. And we can think about what class she came from, how that might have affected her career progression and her education in general. There's various there was a class system going on in Ghana and elsewhere, and was she from a mixed race, a coloured family? Was she more the elite? Was she a black professional? Was she middle class? Was she from the bottom working class? Don't know. I mean, not even our knowledge of her going on to the ship to sail to England can tell us that much, because maybe they had a whip round in the family to get her through. Perhaps there wasn't enough family money within the family to buy her transport with her brother across the UK. So it'd be interesting to find out a little bit more about the class that she came from, and obviously what effect imperialism had on Clara and her family, and the way in which her career could have progressed. So we know that Britain at the time was, as Seema mentioned earlier, responsible for bringing a lot of slave labour across from West Africa. So we had a lot of West Africans and Indians, and there was a lot of how can I put it? A lot of manipulation from England about the two groups within the Ghanaian culture, and what effects might that have had on Clara and her family. In terms of race, what was it like to be a person from an ethnic minority in London generally in the 1930s? Now, in looking at this, we came across an article written by Barbara Bush, and it had a really interesting quote in it that I thought, even though we run out of time, I'm going to share with you. On September 23rd, 1934, Winifred Hawtrey wrote to her closest friend, Vera Brittain. Now, these are both committed feminists and pacifists and writers and socialists. You may know some of their work, actually. But she writes to a friend that she had tea and entertained Eric Waldron, a Negro poet from New York, Una Marsden, the Jamaican dramatist, and her cousin, Daisy Pickering. Would you think that party would mix? She asked Vera. What time do you think they last departed? 9:45. I was tired, but it was interesting. We turned the colour question, miscegenation, birth control and race prejudice inside out. So what was it like to be a black person in 1930s Britain? Well, if you're a black boy from like Eric and Una, perhaps your life is going to be slightly different, and you're not typically going to be invited to tea with a white feminist, pacifist, socialist writer like Winifred. But it's interesting to research the context behind that in terms of race. You're also looking at context in terms of sex, obviously. So what was it like to be a woman lawyer in the 1930s? And then we talk about the intersectionality issue. So you've got the double whammy. So what was it like to be a woman lawyer and from an ethnic minority and living in London in 1930s or in 1939 when Clara actually died? So those are the types of questions you'd be asking yourself to give yourself a little more context to build up more about Clara's life. Okay. So a few words in conclusion here. So the importance, why are we researching early ethnic minority women barristers and black and minority ethnic lawyers in general? Caroline and others have touched on that already this morning, so I can whiz through. We can find about, it's an accurate record, isn't it? We're putting down something about the true progress of these lawyers. We're not relying on any myths or legends that may be out there, and we're challenging any damaging stereotypes that might also be out there. In terms of women, we can see what that will tell us about the law and social change at the time. We've got, as we know, the Sex Disqualification Removal Act that broke down all those persistent barriers in entry to the profession. So what can we learn about women lawyers, and what can that tell us about social change? And we also think it has implications for legal education, attracting students into the profession, motivating, inspiring, and building confidence of the whole student body. Now, you may have noticed at the top there a picture of Marion, Wright, Engelmann, and the reason she's there is just another quote. I do love a quote. That's a famous one she has, where she says, it's hard to be what you cannot see. And I think for too long we have women, in particular ethnic minority women, who've gone unseen. And so today, our symposium today and the work we're doing in the temple, that's going to open eyes so they will become seen. Continued research will allow us all to see, acknowledge and appreciate what it is women have done and what it is black ethnic minority lawyers have done for women and the legal profession. And on that positive note, I shall say thank you very much for listening.